The Battle of Vienna in 1683 is one of the most defining moments in European history, and at its heart stands the figure of King Jan III Sobieski of Poland, a commander whose courage and tactical brilliance turned the tide against the mighty Ottoman Empire. The Siege of Vienna and its subsequent relief was not just another military conflict, it was a monumental clash of civilizations, ideologies, and destinies. The Ottoman Empire had stretched across 3 continents, exerting its dominance over the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, and it now sought to strike at the very heart of Christian Europe. Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg monarchy, stood as the gateway into Western Europe, and its fall would have opened the path for Ottoman expansion deep into the continent. Against this overwhelming force, Poland's king rode at the head of a coalition army, ultimately crushing the Ottoman ambitions in one of history's most decisive battles. The roots of this conflict stretch back centuries. The Ottoman Empire had risen to power in the late Middle Ages, steadily conquering lands once held by the Byzantine Empire and gradually expanding northward into southeastern Europe. By the 16th century, the Ottomans were already at the gates of Vienna, having laid siege to the city in 1529, though that attempt failed due to weather, logistical problems, and determined resistance. But the desire to conquer Vienna never faded, and more than 150 years later, the empire under Sultan Mehmed IV was ready to try again, this time with an army numbering well over 100,000 men under the command of Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha. This force dwarfed the defenders of Vienna and represented one of the largest military mobilizations of the era. Vienna itself was ill-prepared. The city had fewer than 20,000 defenders, including soldiers and civilians who took up arms. The Habsburg Emperor Leopold I had fled the city before the siege, retreating to safety with his court, leaving the task of defense to Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, who became the symbol of Vienna's resilience. Starhemberg knew his city was outnumbered but also understood that relief forces could be mobilized if Vienna held out long enough. Every day the defenders fought back against the relentless Ottoman bombardment, digging tunnels, extinguishing fires, and repairing breaches in the walls, all while starvation and disease ravaged the population. The fate of Europe rested on whether Vienna could withstand the siege until help arrived. That help came from an unlikely coalition. The papacy, recognizing the threat posed by the Ottomans, pushed hard for a united Christian response. Pope Innocent XI orchestrated a holy league, though many European monarchs were hesitant. Internal rivalries, religious divisions, and political ambitions made unity difficult. France, under King Louis XIV, was notably absent from this coalition, preferring to watch events unfold while pursuing its own expansionist agenda in Europe. But Poland, under King Jan Sobieski, agreed to intervene. Sobieski was not just a monarch, he was a seasoned military commander with years of experience battling the Ottomans on the Polish frontier. He understood the Ottoman methods of war and was uniquely positioned to confront them. Sobieski's decision to march to Vienna was not an easy one. Poland had its own troubles, including political divisions and pressure from neighboring powers. But Sobieski saw beyond immediate politics. He recognized that the fall of Vienna would embolden the Ottoman Empire and destabilize Central and Eastern Europe, including his own kingdom. A treaty with the Habsburgs bound him to defend Vienna, but Sobieski also felt a personal sense of duty. In his letters, he wrote of the need to defend Christendom and of his belief that God had placed him in a position to play a decisive role in this great struggle. The march to Vienna was itself a remarkable feat of logistics and leadership. Sobieski led a Polish contingent of around 30,000 men, including the legendary Polish Winged Hussars, an elite cavalry force renowned for their discipline, courage, and devastating charges. These troops were joined by German, Austrian, and other Allied forces, bringing the coalition army to around 70,000. Still, they faced an Ottoman force that outnumbered them by perhaps 2 to 1. Yet the morale, leadership, and determination of the coalition made up for their numerical disadvantage. On September 12, 1683, the decisive battle unfolded. The Ottomans had been besieging Vienna for 2 months, bringing the defenders to the brink of collapse. Tunnels were dug beneath the city walls to plant explosives, and massive assaults threatened to overwhelm the exhausted garrison. But at dawn, the relief army appeared on the hills surrounding Vienna, ready to strike. Sobieski took overall command of the coalition forces, a testament to his reputation and trustworthiness among the Allies. His plan was bold: to attack the Ottoman positions head-on, break their siege lines, and then unleash his cavalry in a final decisive strike. The battle raged throughout the day. The Ottomans, confident in their numbers and their months of siege warfare, met the Allied attack with ferocity. But the coalition forces pressed forward, pushing back the Ottoman wings and slowly gaining ground. Meanwhile, inside Vienna, the defenders launched sallies to coincide with the relief army's assault, creating chaos in the Ottoman ranks. As the afternoon wore on, the moment for Sobieski's masterstroke arrived. At the head of 18,000 cavalry, including his 3,000 winged hussars, Sobieski led what has been called the largest cavalry charge in history. Thundering down the hills into the Ottoman lines, the sight of the armored hussars with their great wings attached to their backs was terrifying. The sheer momentum of this charge smashed through the Ottoman defenses, sending panic rippling through their army. Kara Mustafa Pasha's forces, already strained from the day's fighting and the months of siege, could not withstand this overwhelming blow. The Ottomans broke and fled, abandoning their camps and artillery. The siege was lifted, Vienna was saved, and Europe breathed a sigh of relief. Sobieski rode into the city to the cheers of its inhabitants, hailed as the savior of Vienna and Christendom. His victory cemented his place in history and changed the trajectory of Europe. The aftermath of the battle was significant. The Ottoman defeat at Vienna marked the beginning of their long retreat from Central Europe. Though the empire remained powerful, it would never again threaten the heart of Europe with such force. The Holy League continued its campaigns, gradually pushing the Ottomans southward and reclaiming territories in Hungary and the Balkans. For the Habsburg monarchy, the victory ensured their survival and set the stage for their rise as a dominant European power in the centuries that followed. For Poland, the victory was both a triumph and a fleeting moment of glory. Sobieski's reputation soared, but Poland's internal political struggles continued to weaken the kingdom, preventing it from fully capitalizing on the prestige gained at Vienna. From a broader perspective, the Battle of Vienna is often portrayed as a clash of civilizations, with Christian Europe standing against Islamic expansion. While this framing has been debated by modern historians, it cannot be denied that contemporaries saw the battle in such terms. Sobieski himself, in his letters to the Pope, described the victory as the defense of Christianity, famously paraphrasing Julius Caesar's words, "Venemus, vitimus, Deus vicit, we came, we saw, God conquered." This sense of divine mission and the portrayal of Sobieski as a hero of Christendom became part of the legend of the battle, inspiring art, literature, and memory for generations. The role of the Polish Winged Hussars in particular has achieved near-mythical status. These cavalrymen, with their long lances, disciplined formations, and iconic wings, represented the pinnacle of early modern heavy cavalry. At Vienna, their charge demonstrated how shock tactics could still be decisive even in an age increasingly dominated by gunpowder and fortifications. The image of the hussars sweeping down the hills to smash the Ottomans has become one of the most enduring symbols of the battle and of Polish military history. But beyond the glory and heroism, the battle also reveals the complexities of European politics in the late 17th century. The very fact that France, a Catholic power, refused to support the defense of Vienna highlights the rivalries that divided Europe. The victory was not the result of a perfectly united Christendom but rather the determination of certain leaders, above all Sobieski, who chose to act decisively. It also underscores the importance of individual leadership in history. Without Sobieski's courage, vision, and military genius, the outcome might have been very different. The Ottoman Empire, for its part, faced internal consequences. Kara Mustafa Pasha was held responsible for the defeat and was executed shortly afterward by order of the Sultan. The empire's aura of invincibility was shattered, and its decline, though gradual, began to accelerate. The loss at Vienna signaled to European powers that the Ottomans could be resisted and defeated, emboldening further coalitions against them. The cultural memory of the battle endured across Europe. In Poland, Sobieski became a national hero, celebrated in songs, paintings, and monuments. In Austria, the relief of Vienna was remembered as the moment the city and the Habsburg dynasty were saved from destruction. In broader European consciousness, the battle entered the narrative of a grand defense against an Eastern threat, shaping perceptions of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. Even today, the Battle of Vienna is invoked in discussions about European identity, religion, and the balance of power between East and West. Some see it as a turning point in the history of Christian-Muslim relations, while others emphasize its role in shaping the modern states of Central Europe. For military historians, it remains a fascinating case study of siege warfare, coalition strategy, and the enduring power of cavalry shock tactics in early modern warfare. King Jan Sobieski's legacy is inextricably tied to this battle. Though Poland would later face decline and partition, Sobieski's moment at Vienna stands as one of the most celebrated episodes in its history. His courage, leadership, and the sheer drama of his cavalry charge ensured that his name would be remembered alongside the greatest military leaders of Europe. Vienna's survival not only preserved the Habsburg monarchy but also safeguarded Europe from further Ottoman incursions, making Sobieski's role pivotal in shaping the continent's future. Thus, the Battle of Vienna was far more than just a clash of armies. It was a struggle over the fate of civilizations, a test of endurance, and a triumph of leadership. The sight of the Polish king riding at the head of his winged hussars down the slopes into the Ottoman ranks has become one of the iconic images of history, symbolizing the moment when determination and courage overcame overwhelming odds. It reminds us that history often turns on the actions of individuals, and in 1683, it was Jan Sobieski who turned the tide, crushing the Ottoman Empire's ambitions and securing a legacy that endures to this day. 1. The rise of the Ottoman Empire and its expansion into Europe. The Ottoman Empire rose from a small Anatolian principality in the late 13th century into a global power that stretched across 3 continents. Its armies, fueled by discipline, wealth, and strategic brilliance, captured Constantinople in 1453, ending the Byzantine Empire and opening a new era in world history. From there, the Ottomans advanced steadily into the Balkans, defeating Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526 and establishing themselves as the dominant force in southeastern Europe. Their empire blended military conquest with administrative efficiency, allowing them to manage diverse peoples and cultures. Yet, their expansion created inevitable friction with Christian powers to the west. Vienna, the Habsburg capital, became a key target because it stood at the crossroads of Central Europe. To the Ottomans, capturing it meant securing a gateway into Western Europe. To Europeans, it represented a last defensive wall against invasion. 2. The First Ottoman Siege of Vienna in 1529. Vienna's significance as a target was not new in 1683. Over 150 years earlier, in 1529, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, at the height of Ottoman power, marched his forces into Central Europe and laid siege to Vienna. At that time, the Ottoman army was feared as nearly unstoppable, having crushed Hungarian resistance only 3 years earlier at Mohacs. The defenders of Vienna, though vastly outnumbered, used the city's fortifications, bad weather, and sheer determination to hold off the assault. Heavy rains turned roads into mud, slowed Ottoman artillery, and disrupted supply lines, ultimately forcing Suleiman to abandon the siege. This failure haunted the Ottomans and inspired European defenders. Vienna came to symbolize resistance against Ottoman conquest. For generations, the Ottomans dreamed of returning to finish what Suleiman had started. By 1683, when Kara Mustafa Pasha surrounded the city once more, it was not just a campaign, it was a mission of historical vengeance. 3. Sultan Mehmed IV and Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha's ambitions. By the late 17th century, the Ottoman Empire was ruled by Sultan Mehmed IV, though real power often rested with his Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha. Kara Mustafa was ambitious, proud, and determined to prove the strength of the empire through a dramatic victory. His eyes turned to Vienna, the same city that had resisted Suleiman over a century earlier. To him, capturing Vienna would not only avenge past humiliation but also cement Ottoman dominance over Europe. He marshaled an army estimated at more than 120,000 men, one of the largest ever assembled in the empire's history. Mehmed IV approved the campaign, hoping it would bring glory and secure his legacy. Kara Mustafa, however, underestimated the resilience of Vienna and the potential for a united European response. His overconfidence, combined with his refusal to retreat even when the situation worsened, would ultimately seal both his fate and the empire's decline. 4. The strategic importance of Vienna as the gateway to Europe. Vienna's location on the Danube River made it one of the most strategically vital cities in Europe. It stood as the capital of the Habsburg monarchy and as a bulwark between the Ottoman-controlled Balkans and the heart of Western Europe. Whoever controlled Vienna controlled the major trade and military routes running through Central Europe. If the Ottomans had taken the city, the road to Germany, Italy, and even France would have been opened, allowing them to spread their influence deep into the continent. For the Habsburgs, defending Vienna was about more than survival, it was about preserving Christian Europe's balance of power. This is why the siege of 1683 drew such attention across the continent. It was not merely an Austrian struggle but a battle that would determine whether Europe itself would remain free from Ottoman domination or succumb to an unstoppable imperial force advancing from the east. 5. The Habsburg monarchy's desperation and Emperor Leopold's flight. When Kara Mustafa Pasha's massive army advanced toward Vienna in 1683, panic spread throughout the Habsburg territories. Emperor Leopold I realized that the city could not be defended with his limited forces, and rather than be captured, he fled Vienna with his court and treasury, retreating to safety in Passau. While this decision preserved the monarchy, it left the city's population to fend for themselves. To many, it felt like abandonment. Leadership fell into the hands of military commanders, particularly Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, who became responsible for organizing Vienna's defenses. The emperor's flight damaged morale but also made it clear that Vienna's citizens and soldiers had no choice but to hold out until reinforcements could arrive. If the city fell, it would mean the collapse of the Habsburg monarchy itself, which is why Vienna's defenders resolved to resist with every resource at their disposal. 6. The heroic role of Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg. At the center of Vienna's defense was Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a seasoned military officer and loyal servant of the Habsburgs. With fewer than 20,000 defenders under his command, he faced an Ottoman force that outnumbered him more than 6-1. Despite these impossible odds, Starhemberg refused to surrender. He directed the repair of fortifications under constant bombardment, organized counterattacks, and inspired the population to contribute to the city's defense. His leadership turned ordinary citizens into fighters, women into suppliers of food and medical care, and children into couriers. His resolve became legendary, with his defiant words echoing, "Vienna would hold out or perish." By maintaining discipline, rationing supplies, and keeping morale alive, Starhemberg ensured that the city resisted long enough for relief forces to arrive. Without his determination, Vienna would almost certainly have collapsed before Sobieski's army could reach it. 7. The brutality of the siege, hunger, disease, and constant bombardment. Life inside Vienna during the siege was a nightmare. Ottoman cannons thundered daily, smashing holes in the city walls, while miners dug tunnels beneath the defenses to plant explosives. Constant bombardment reduced entire neighborhoods to rubble, forcing citizens to live in ruins or underground shelters. Food supplies dwindled rapidly, leading to starvation. Rats, dogs, and even leather were eaten to stave off hunger. Disease spread in the cramped, unsanitary conditions, claiming countless lives. Civilians lived in fear of the Ottomans breaching the walls, knowing that if the city fell, massacre and enslavement would follow. Yet, despite this unimaginable hardship, the population's spirit remained unbroken. They drew strength from faith, patriotism, and the leadership of Starhemberg. Each day of resistance bought precious time for the relief army. Vienna's suffering became the foundation for one of history's greatest moments of salvation when Sobieski's forces finally arrived. 8. The Pope and the creation of the Holy League. Pope Innocent XI recognized that the fall of Vienna would have catastrophic consequences for all of Christendom. To him, the struggle was not merely political but spiritual, a fight for the survival of Christian Europe. He tirelessly campaigned to unite the often divided Catholic and Protestant powers against the common Ottoman threat. His efforts led to the formation of the Holy League, a coalition of states willing to contribute troops and resources. Yet, unity was far from easy. France, under Louis XIV, refused to participate, preferring to focus on its own ambitions in Europe. Still, the Pope's diplomacy succeeded in persuading Poland, the Holy Roman Empire, and several German states to act together. By offering financial support and framing the struggle as a holy mission, he gave leaders like Jan Sobieski moral and religious justification for intervention. The papal blessing turned the defense of Vienna into a crusade-like endeavor. 9. King Jan III Sobieski of Poland's decision to intervene. Jan Sobieski, King of Poland, was already a celebrated military leader known for his victories against the Ottomans in previous battles. He understood their tactics, strengths, and weaknesses better than most European rulers. When news of Vienna's desperate situation reached him, he recognized that Poland could not remain idle. Though Poland had its own internal troubles, including political disputes and pressure from neighboring powers, Sobieski saw the bigger picture. If Vienna fell, Poland would soon face the Ottoman threat directly. Bound by a treaty with the Habsburgs and urged on by Pope Innocent XI, Sobieski committed himself to leading a relief army. His decision was both political and deeply personal. In his letters, he wrote of the need to defend Christendom and expressed his belief that he was fulfilling a divine mission. His leadership would soon prove decisive in shaping the outcome of the battle. 10. The legendary Polish Winged Hussars. Among Sobieski's forces were the famed Polish Winged Hussars, one of the most feared cavalry units in history. These warriors were distinguished by their tall wings attached to their armor, made of wooden frames with feathers that created a striking and terrifying image on the battlefield. Their equipment included long lances, sabers, and pistols, making them versatile shock troops. Trained for discipline, speed, and precision, the Winged Hussars had already earned a reputation for breaking enemy lines against overwhelming odds. At Vienna, around 3,000 hussars rode with Sobieski, ready to deliver the decisive blow. Their charge down the slopes into the Ottoman lines on September 12, 1683, would become legendary, remembered as the largest cavalry charge in history. The sight of these armored horsemen, their wings fluttering and their lances poised, struck fear into the Ottomans and symbolized the power of Sobieski's intervention. 11. The long march of Sobieski's army and the formation of the coalition. The journey to Vienna was as impressive as the battle itself. Sobieski mobilized about 30,000 Polish troops, including his Winged Hussars, and marched them across difficult terrain toward the besieged city. Along the way, his army joined forces with German and Austrian contingents, eventually forming a coalition of around 70,000 men. Despite their differences in language, culture, and military style, the troops shared a common mission: to save Vienna from destruction. Sobieski assumed overall command, a testament to the trust other leaders placed in him. The march required immense logistical skill, with supplies stretched thin and soldiers enduring long days of travel. Yet, the knowledge that Vienna was holding out against impossible odds inspired the men to push forward. By the time they reached the hills surrounding the city in September 1683, this diverse coalition had become a unified force, ready to deliver a decisive strike against the Ottomans. 12. The vast Ottoman army and its siege preparations. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha commanded one of the largest armies the Ottoman Empire had ever assembled, estimated between 120,000 and 150,000 men. This massive host included elite janissaries, cavalry, artillery units, and engineers. The Ottomans encircled Vienna and constructed extensive siege works, digging trenches and tunnels to undermine the city's defenses. Artillery barrages pounded the walls day and night, while miners sought to collapse fortifications with explosives. Kara Mustafa's strategy was methodical. He intended to starve Vienna into submission and then storm it with overwhelming force. He established a vast encampment around the city, complete with tents, supply depots, and defensive positions. Yet his very ambition proved a weakness. Instead of prioritizing speed, he dragged out the siege, hoping to claim Vienna intact as a prize for himself. This delay gave Sobieski and the coalition time to mobilize and approach, setting the stage for the eventual Ottoman disaster. 13. The morning of September 12, 1683. The day of battle dawned with tension thick in the air. On September 12, the Allied forces, led by Sobieski, positioned themselves on the Kahlenberg heights overlooking Vienna. From this vantage point, they could see the Ottoman siege lines sprawling below, with tents and artillery surrounding the exhausted city. The coalition army, though smaller, held the advantage of terrain and surprise. Sobieski devised a plan. The infantry and artillery of the Allied forces would attack the Ottoman flanks and gradually weaken their lines, while he held his cavalry in reserve for the decisive strike. Inside Vienna, Starhemberg and his defenders prepared to coordinate their efforts by launching sorties against the Ottomans. As dawn broke, the Allies advanced with determination. The clash of steel and thunder of cannons echoed across the battlefield, signaling that the long-awaited relief of Vienna had begun, and history was about to be made. 14. The coalition's attack on the Ottoman lines. The Allied attack began with German and Austrian infantry pressing against the Ottoman flanks. Fierce fighting erupted as the Ottomans resisted with volleys of musket fire and artillery. Slowly, however, the coalition advanced, breaking through trenches and pushing the Ottomans back from their fortified positions. The coordination among the Allied forces was remarkable given their diverse backgrounds. Bavarian, Saxon, and Polish units fought side by side, demonstrating both discipline and courage. Ottoman forces, though numerous, found themselves stretched thin, forced to defend their vast encampment while still maintaining the siege of Vienna itself. As pressure mounted from the outside, the defenders of Vienna seized the opportunity to launch counterattacks from within the city, creating chaos among Kara Mustafa's troops. By mid-afternoon, the Ottomans were struggling to hold their positions, and Sobieski recognized that the moment for his decisive cavalry charge had finally arrived. 15. The defenders of Vienna launching counterattacks from inside. Throughout the siege, Vienna's defenders had endured unimaginable hardship, but on September 12, their chance to strike back arrived. As Sobieski's coalition army attacked from the outside, Starhemberg coordinated sorties from within the city. Exhausted soldiers, supported by civilians, poured out of the battered gates to attack Ottoman siege works, disrupt artillery, and engage the besiegers at close quarters. This unexpected pressure divided Ottoman attention, forcing them to fight on two fronts simultaneously. For the first time in months, the defenders of Vienna were no longer passive victims but active participants in turning the tide. Their desperate courage magnified the effectiveness of Sobieski's assault, amplifying the confusion in the Ottoman ranks. What had once been an organized siege line devolved into chaos. The combined weight of pressure from inside and outside the city proved too much for the Ottomans to control, setting the stage for total collapse. By late afternoon, Sobieski unleashed his masterstroke. At the head of 18,000 cavalry, including 3,000 winged hussars, he led what is regarded as the largest cavalry charge in history. From the heights of Kahlenberg, the cavalry thundered down the slopes toward the Ottoman lines. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Thousands of armored horsemen, lances poised, their distinctive wings creating a rush of noise and spectacle. The impact of this charge was devastating. Ottoman positions crumbled under the momentum, and panic spread through their army. Soldiers who had endured hours of combat now faced an unstoppable wall of charging horsemen. The winged hussars spearheaded the attack, breaking through enemy formations with precision and ferocity. The charge shattered Ottoman morale, turning retreat into a rout. It was the decisive blow that ended the siege, cementing Sobieski's reputation as one of the greatest cavalry commanders in history. 17. The collapse of Ottoman morale and the flight of Kara Mustafa Pasha's army. The moment Sobieski's cavalry charge struck, the Ottoman army's morale collapsed. Exhausted from 2 months of siege and battered by coalition assaults from multiple directions, Kara Mustafa Pasha's once proud host descended into panic. Soldiers abandoned their posts, tents, and supplies, fleeing in disarray. The carefully constructed siege works fell apart as chaos spread through the ranks. Kara Mustafa himself attempted to rally his forces but was overwhelmed by the speed and scale of the collapse. The Ottomans left behind vast amounts of artillery, ammunition, and treasure, all of which were captured by the victors. What had begun as a campaign to secure glory for the empire ended in humiliation and disaster. The defeat at Vienna shattered the aura of Ottoman invincibility in Europe, and Kara Mustafa's failure would cost him his life. For the defenders and the coalition, the flight of the Ottomans meant complete victory. 18. Sobieski's triumphant entry into Vienna. After the rout of the Ottomans, Sobieski rode into Vienna to the sound of jubilant cheers from its exhausted but grateful citizens. He was hailed not only as the savior of the city but as the protector of Christendom. The contrast was striking. Weeks earlier, Vienna had been on the brink of collapse, its people starving and its walls crumbling. Now, thanks to Sobieski's leadership and courage, the threat had been lifted. His entry into the city was both a moment of triumph and a symbol of unity across Europe. In his letter to Pope Innocent XI, Sobieski famously declared, "We came, we saw, God conquered," attributing victory to divine providence. For the Viennese, he was a hero, for the Habsburgs, he was a savior, and for Poland, he became a symbol of national pride. The liberation of Vienna became his enduring legacy. 19. The immediate aftermath: Ottoman decline and Kara Mustafa's execution. The defeat at Vienna was catastrophic for the Ottoman Empire. Though still powerful, the empire would never again launch such a massive offensive into Central Europe. The loss marked the beginning of a long decline. Kara Mustafa Pasha, who had refused to retreat earlier in the siege despite growing risks, was blamed for the disaster. His arrogance and insistence on claiming Vienna intact rather than destroying it when possible contributed to his downfall. Sultan Mehmed IV, furious over the humiliation, ordered Kara Mustafa's execution. He was strangled with a silk cord, the traditional method of execution for high-ranking officials. Meanwhile, the victory emboldened European powers. The Holy League continued campaigns that gradually pushed the Ottomans southward, reclaiming territory in Hungary and the Balkans. Vienna's salvation had changed the balance of power in Europe, weakening Ottoman influence and strengthening the Habsburg monarchy for centuries to come. 20. The legacy of the Battle of Vienna and Sobieski's heroism. The Battle of Vienna remains one of the most celebrated military victories in European history. It not only saved a city but also marked a turning point in the centuries-long struggle between the Ottoman Empire and Europe. For Poland, King Jan III Sobieski became a national hero, his name forever linked to the legendary charge of the Winged Hussars. For Austria and the Habsburgs, the victory preserved their empire and laid the foundation for future dominance in Central Europe. The battle also became a symbol of Christian unity against a common threat, celebrated in art, literature, and religious memory. Though modern historians caution against simplistic clash of civilizations interpretations, contemporaries undoubtedly saw the victory in spiritual terms. Sobieski's courage and tactical brilliance ensured that his legacy endured. The thunder of his cavalry on the slopes of Kahlenberg still echoes in history as the moment Europe was saved.